So on the IFPRI report itself, I read the report. I had some colleagues reading it, and we all agree it was a major modeling effort. And we've seen what Mark presented. You have so many different types of model linked together. You have so many crops, so many technologies. It's pretty amazing. And I was at IFPRI when it all started, and I remember seeing some of my colleagues coming door to ask, how can we do those 11 technology, 3 crops? How can we get those data? How are we going to do it? Well, at the end, it worked. So they found a way to go through it with many other colleagues, and so it's an amazing work. But more importantly, perhaps, it's leading to interesting and useful results. When you work in science and technologies in agriculture, what people constantly ask you, whether policymakers, funders, investors, and so on, is what technology works where. The prioritization is the key. You tell me you work on this technology, but is it really what we should do? Should we put our money there or there? Should we put it both, etc.? So this is sort of the responses that this report brings. So I think it's very useful and relevant for a number of people, not only in developing countries, but also in the OECD countries, in a lot of developed countries. So I won't talk about the results because they've been presented, but I wanted to put them in perspective here, on the developing country side on the left-hand side and the developed country on the right. And here I put the cumulative yield effects. So this is sort of the total effect, so it's kind of artificial numbers, but we have the wheat in green, the rice in red, and the blue is the maize, sorry. And so you have all those technology down there in the horizontal axis. Basically, what you see overall is that the relative ranking would vary by crop, technology, and region, just like Mark said. But still, at least in my view, if you had to pick a few, at least as champion to push forward even more, perhaps, you find that 4 technology seems to go forward, and these are the nitrogen use efficiency, heat tolerance, no-till, and precision agriculture. And this is on the yield part, not so much on the resource part, but I think some of them also would be on the resource part. So that's something I might go back to it, and I think it's one of the lessons that I got from this report is those technology. I wouldn't have thought about those as the first picks, perhaps, just like Mark said, no-till, it comes as a big one. But they come out very strongly. At the same time, when you ask modelers or people that work in this business to look at it, they say, well, it's great, but we could do even better. So they had some suggestion to do further work, and I think IFPRI will do that anyway. On the modeling side, whether working on different climate, using the new tools that IFPRI is developing, both on the impact model, on maybe groundwater, some other things, the baseline scenarios, having different types of adoptions. Won't take into details, but more could be definitely done on this basis, on this very useful basis. The resource focus, I thought, in the report, there's a lot of results, but perhaps because the yield and food security aspects were brought forward, maybe the resource was not as much used as it could be. I just talked about some kind of a ranking of productivity based on yield of the graphs I showed. But those water conservation options appear on the right-hand side as low yield, just as Mark said, because that's not what they're for. And if you put them together, it's great. But what about analyzing productivity with respect to multiple resources, land, nitrogen, and water together, and see what is this sort of prioritization from a sustainable perspective? When you think about, water could be potentially partially depleted in some region in 2050, and nitrogen also could become a scarce resource. So, it would be even more interesting based on those results to work on that. The climate change mitigation potential is also something that I heard of interest because there's this big initiative, the Climate Smart Agriculture Alliance, that is going to be launched in the UN in September, where they want to, a number of organizations, including the UN, want to look at technology that would be sort of win-win-win, productivity enhancing, helping to adapt to climate change, and mitigate climate change. And I think some of those that they find as priority would actually fit very well. So if we have those results, that would even be a way to move forward on this initiative. And then moving to implementation, I think we're going to discuss that in the panel and in the second panel as well. The adoption, acceptance, and the role of policies. I'm just going to touch on some of those questions in my next little part here on the implication for OECD countries. So I'll focus on OECD countries because that's the one we work with. But I think it's, as I said, these are very useful results as well for countries of, say, North America or Europe. Here I present North America on the left-hand side and Europe on the right-hand side. Because not only as such, but because there is actually less economic work on adaptation to climate change in those countries than, say, in Africa and South Asia, which perhaps it should be because there is more risk in those continents. But we are looking for numbers, and countries are looking for numbers, and so once we get some, we're actually very happy to see them. What we see here is, again, those 4 technologies are are getting out of the picture. The heat tolerance in maize, I think Mark talked about it, the no-till meat and maize for North America and Europe is precision agriculture, tolerance no-till, and the nitrogen use efficiency all around. So not to get into details, we can identify some of those, and again, those four seem to be, the integrated soil fertility management could also be a very big option in some countries, but in those areas, it seems to be less of a useful option as well, the crop protection, of course. But the big question for us, as Secretariat working with government is, so then, okay, so if we had those four technologies, so what should we do as governments? What is the role of governments to pursue these options? And that's sort of a bigger question we have because we are looking at climate change adaptation in agriculture. We have this work going on what is the role of public versus private actors in this area. And so this is ongoing work. This is not yet published, and we're still working on that. But some countries are wondering whether they should intervene more on adaptation for farmers in OECD countries, or should they let the farmers just decide and do it their own because they will adapt anyway to the constraint they see. So this is just a graph that shows some preliminary results on a number of countries out of the 34 OECD member states. So I hope you see the numbers, but basically 34 is the top of the figure there, that have adopted different types of adaptation policy. You have research and development, capacity building, et cetera, and some do technology, some do only disaster risk reduction, infrastructure. Well, you have some countries within OECD, it's not homogeneous. Some countries will just focus on those essential policy R&D information. Others will just say, well, we need to really move farmers forward, otherwise they won't adopt those. So that's a question that I think also in Africa and others could be asked, but in a different setting, because there the public sector might have a much bigger role. I thought about those four technologies, and where should I put them if I had, what would be the role of farmers, the role of companies, and the role of governments to move those, say, four technologies forward in the next 50 years, next 40 years. And this is very qualitative and perhaps provocative. The point of this is saying, well, really, do we need that much governments? The heat tolerance, germplasm improvement, my perspective is that the comparative advantage may be in the companies because they have the technology, they move relatively quickly. Although there is research, public research that is very useful on the fundamental of genetics and improving those varieties. But on the OECD countries' perspective, perhaps companies have a bigger role to play than governments on those two that are not yet out there. When you look at precision agriculture, not only companies play a significant role, but farmers also innovate in using this or that type of mix of technologies in moving towards precision agriculture. So I put them a little higher. But again, I don't see governments as being the fundamental driver of precision agriculture in those countries. And no-till, you could put it in the middle of this triangle. You could argue that everybody played a role, but it seems that some of those techniques have been there for a while, and so farmers are actually the ones that take it on, in my, my very qualitative view, with obviously technologies out there that have been developed by companies and some by governments. But overall, potentially limited directed role of OECD governments is what I come out of that. And again, if you were taking it to a more global perspective, it would be perhaps very different. But it asks us, so what should we do then to make those things work? Well, what really matters is to have this so-called enabling environment. To have this technology move forward, you need to have all those things that will make sure that they will. Science and technology policies, continuing to invest in research, in agriculture policies that don't distort prices, and trade policies. And I think that's what, on those technologies seems to be the way to go in our countries. So to finish up on the specific last points I had on the international trade, and this is not only OECD, that's everywhere. Why would trade matters, and why could we talk about trade? You probably know that the freer trade allows a number of things, but among those, if you look at those technologies, increased competition to having larger markets of competitive innovator is actually a good thing because you would have faster going to those very innovative techniques, heat tolerance and use efficiency if you have more players competing against each other. You could have spillover of knowledge. That's another one where no-till maybe would be practiced in one country and in a really efficient way, and then there would be exchanges through university or others that would bring to another country the same techniques. And you have, for precision agriculture or any type of technologies, if you have a market that is open for input and outputs, it actually facilitates the use of technologies here and there. So this is sort of one of the enabling factors that I mentioned. And I think, on the trade side, what could we do? And I work also on trade and environment, so I know a lot of things that have happened at WTO recently. But increased exchange of ideas, research, and cooperation is something that everybody is looking for. removing distortion to agriculture input and output markets is something that at OECD we're trying to work on, but it's kind of difficult. It's not always easy to move in this direction. And then the third one is perhaps the most tricky one, is coping with regulatory divergences. We had the former WTO chief last week at OECD coming for a speech, Pascal Lamy, and he was presenting his book. But among the things that he reflected on is the fact that the WTO, there was a lot of discussion about protection in the past, protectionism and protecting our producers and each country doing its own. And now it moved from protection to precaution and protecting consumers and having different types of standards. And that's perfectly understandable. But because there are so many different standards, it's actually difficult, and it can create barriers to trade in different ways. And that's very difficult to tackle because countries have different perception and things. And that could create an issue for the future. And it's going to take a long time to actually work on those. So thank you. Look forward to the discussion.
Well, you talk about implementation, and it's a great segue to Robert. But before I ask Robert to walk up there, I'm curious if you tease out a little bit, and again, we'll do this as a group, and I open it up to the conversation. This enabling environment you talk about. Isn't the enabling environment another way of saying all of the above? I mean, you need all of these things armed with this knowledge.
No, you're right. I mean, there's a number of things, and that's why it's a very useful buzzwords that we use all the time in our business. No, but the point was that beyond just working on those technologies, if you don't work on those technologies, they will never get out, or if you don't have farmers. But all those different things that will make sure it goes forward are at least as important. So on the political side, making sure that regulation works, or that you have an open, free, and exchange of ideas and trade, etc., is actually very important and crucial, and having it spread out over the world. You could have a couple of countries taking it on, and not the other ones, and you would lose on those big results that Mark presented if you don't.
And I'm interested too in this enabling environment, the comment about protection versus precaution.
It was not my words, but I thought
it's quite interesting. So does precaution pile on top of protection, or is it sort of trumping?
Well, the way he framed it, he said it moved. There was a shift, so it was protection very much in the past. He wasn't talking about agriculture. It's just general in trade. So maybe agriculture is a little different, obviously. But I think he had a good point. The discussion, I went to some of them, on very specific issues like carbon footprint and things like that. There was a full day of discussion at WTO about carbon footprint and labels, which seems to be something very. But no country would, stand up and say, this is going to be a problem for trade. This is going to be a problem for agriculture. This was, some developing countries, and we have to discuss those. And these are different standards, and countries want to label differently or measure carbon, and those kind of things makes it tricky because there's good intention on both sides, but at the end, finding the right way that doesn't exclude some players is critical.
Well, when we engage with the group here, I think too one of the things to really look at a little bit is this role of governance that you talked about, being from OECD. That's something you do on a daily basis. But the role that governance, farmers, and the private sector will play may be driven in some very interesting ways by the findings here.